11th. It's Wednesday the 11th, 2021. Your host, Dana Durnford, the nuclear proctologist.org. You got to put THE in front of it to get to my site. And you can call in 709-589-4406. 709-589-4406. And you can call that 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. If I hear it, I'll answer it. Hope everybody's doing good. We're going to talk about tanks, the law tanks. The Geiger counter, by the way, is in real time. The tanks. Now, I've got to make all these videos again because they took down my site last week with 24,000 subscribers. Nobody knows why they took it down. YouTube's not, or CIA is not saying. And 1,600 presentations. And so all the blogs that were connected now have no link to me. No link to me. Fukushima. So everybody's worried about the tanks. See those bags? There's actually 30 million of them. 1-ton bags. And so every time it rains, the whole country washes radiation out into the ocean. Because the bags, 30 million 1-ton bags were picked up in just 3% of the land in 5 prefectures where they wanted people to grow food again. That's the gallows laugh, and to move back into. Professor Fukushima is absolutely horrifying. Radiation will be entering the Pacific for decades. The date on that is 2013. So they want you to think that the tanks are holding all the water. And that's how they're hoodwinking you, as you'll see coming up here. Okay, so we'll go back to 2013. First though, I want to show you my video. 5 thumbs down, 25 minutes before the show started. 5 thumbs down. That happened in a matter of 3 minutes. So it was just a public relation firm doesn't want you to hear what I got to show you. If you like evidence, you come to the right place. If you don't like evidence, you came to the wrong place. August the 20th, 2013, Japan had 1,000 steel tanks. 1,000 steel tanks. 2014, Japan had 1,200 tanks. 12 industrial tanks. 1,200, I'm sorry, tanks. Also, in the winter of 2014, they moved the numbers back to 1,000 tanks. 1,000. And they said they had 6,000 workers pass through the guarded gates. What a statement. Guarded gates at a nuclear meltdown. There's not 6,000 workers. There's a couple of hundred homeless people. That's the fact. And they're claiming 6,000 people were working mostly on the contaminated water, so the Pacific wouldn't get poisoned, right? That's the fable, as you'll see coming up. Okay, so in 2017, they had, my eyes are not working tonight or what? 900 tanks and 1,000,000 tons. 900 tanks. So they had, in 2013, they had 1,000 tanks. 2014, they had 1,200. 2017, they had 900 large tanks with 1,000. That's Photoshop. Look at him. Look at the way his hands are, and look at the way his feet are. Nobody actually walks like that. He's posed in front of a green screen. And I don't know why they done that, but they done it. So the idea was that don't worry about the Pacific Ocean, we got everything in tanks, but that's simply not true. 2019, that line my finger is on, 1,000 tanks at the Fukushima Daiichi site. 2019, they got 1,000 tanks. 2021, they got 1,000 tanks. So 2013, they had 1,000 tanks. 2021, they have 1,000 tanks. In 2014, they had 1,200 tanks. In 2017, they had 900 tanks. And in 2019, they had 1,000 tanks. In 2021, they have 1,000 tanks. So there's something wrong with that picture. And they're hoodwinking you, they're tricking you and deceiving you. 6 in Fukushima children tested have diabetes because everything is in the tanks. Of course not. The whole country is radioactive. Every time they have typhoons or cyclones down there, I can't remember what they have there for some reason, or every time you have rain and snow, that whole country is washing radiation out into the ocean. But the original releases were astronomical. So they got 80,000 school children with dosimeters. They won't move them out. The industry is actually insane. And they picked up 30 million one-ton bags. So they don't want you to think about anything like that. They want you to think about the tanks and tritium. As you'll see, that's an incredible fable. Think about the Japan Times column as the public, possibly worldwide, sickens over time. The truth will come out about Fukushima. Now, North America will not be safe from radiation. Animals suddenly died on the West Coast right after 2011, which is Fukushima. The whole world noticed this phenomenon. So what you see behind me is a model of the radioactive fallout. It was this incredible pulse. And what I mean by that was this continuous plume that's still coming out of there, by the way. This is airborne plume. And it was all these reactors melting down, and all the fuel pools at the top of the buildings had melted down. This is equal to thousands of Chernobyls of uranium and plutonium and curium fission products. And so this big pulse covering the entire northern hemisphere and most of the southern hemisphere, this model stopped, was just for 468 hours. And 468 hours, I got to do the math for some reason. 468 divided by 24 hours. Anybody got a guess before I come up with the number? 1001. On the count of 5, I'll tell you the number. That's 20 days. Okay, I lied. Counted from 0. So in 20 days, the plume covered the entire northern hemisphere. The entire northern hemisphere. Concerned half of Japan to be covered in nuclear waste. 16 older should be prepared to die at the Fukushima plant. I'm just going to cover a couple of these headlines we didn't cover last night. I was out on the ocean today. I'll show you some videos from that, doing a species count, and it went very badly. Those 16 older should be prepared to die. So does it sound like they have it under control. Does it sound like the tanks are the only thing you should worry about? Half of Japan to be covered in nuclear waste. Well, it was the entire northern hemisphere, all of Japan, all of China, all of Russia, all the Pacific, all the Atlantic, all of the northern hemisphere, all of Europe. Things are going badly. It's the same as a war, says the military officer in charge. Workers at the site do not consent to join the battle. People held hostages. Unprecedented ocean contamination. Unprecedented ocean contamination. So you can see here the whole ocean is covered and the Atlantic is covered. And that's saturated from the surface all the way to the ocean floor suspended. Shocking how many people died at Fukushima. Fukushima radiation workers found near the plant the bodies of them cremated. Such a high rate of cancer in Fukushima children. Professor, Fukushima workers told us about all the deaths happening at the nuclear plant. It's not pretty. Okay, we're almost there. So this is reactor 3 detonating. Now tomorrow night's show is going to be on reactor 4 and reactor 3 because we no longer have any videos on the entire planet that shows that true story, right? So this is actually reactor 4. Radiation levels of several dozens of sieverts. These are lethal doses right away. There is no plant, right? It's gone. It's completely gone. And obviously reactor 3 is gone. So this is one of the reactors when my finger is pointed. That's 190 feet tall. So you can imagine how big this explosion actually is of reactor 3. Fukushima will end very, very badly. No one knows how to stop it. So what they decided to do was go public relation on everybody and lie. Fukushima fallout is now spread throughout Japan, now confirmed at Okinawa, 1,700 kilometers away. So every time it rains in that country, that whole country hemorrhages radiation into the ocean. Shocking. Official made it mandatory to use Fukushima rice in school lunches. The reason they're calling that shocking is because it's a nuclear wasteland. It's not just the ocean, of course, and they're shipping that food to you in the northern hemisphere. Fukushima nuclear plume covered most of North America. Most of North America. It actually covered the entire northern hemisphere, everything. But that was early, right? March the 19th, 2011. So 8 days after Fukushima nuclear plume covered most of North America. Just bear with me 1 second, I'll get you. Fukushima. Oh, a little bit lower, Dana. There we go. I just got 2 headlines I forgot to bring in. Here we go. Ooh la la la, and this is good. Okay, Fukushima plume covered most of North America. So that means the whole ocean. Not that one. Sorry, here we go. Deteriorating plant threatens mass extinction around the world. So they want you to think about tritium and dumping in the ocean in the future. But they don't want you to think about what's happened. So cesium remains dispersed throughout the water column from the surface to the ocean floor. 2012, from the surface to the ocean floor. And they tell you cesium because they don't want to say the words uranium, plutonium, and curium. And you can't have cesium without plutonium, uranium, lethal hot particles, fission products. And the reason they say deteriorating plant threatens mass extinction around the world is because, as I showed you the models earlier, of the radioactive fallout. The radioactive fallout is the Achilles heel for planet Earth. Highly contaminated marine snow covered the seafloor at least 2,000 kilometers from Fukushima by July 2011. But the airborne plume giving me a hard time here tonight. Let me play this model for you. So this is the airborne plume. Okay, so that's the Atlantic to the right and the Pacific to the far left. This is a continuous plume. So the whole ocean is already contaminated. And the whole ocean now is on its deathbed. Okay, so there was
maybe worse than thought. Studies from last year indicate that radioactive water will contaminate the entire Pacific Ocean in just 6 years. Kim Min-ji reports.
This graphic shows the gradual contamination of the Pacific Ocean due to leaks of radioactive water from the crippled Fukushima nuclear plant in Japan. The simulation, which was run by a German marine research institute, shows the entire Pacific waters being polluted by radioactive water in just 6 years.
Hi, Dana, Nasana, obsolete. So the entire Pacific Ocean covered in radiation in just 6 years. And that's August the 23rd, 2013. But you can see the actual ocean is covered in radiation in just 8 days. And that the radioactive sea spray has been shown to blow hundreds of kilometers inland. Hundreds of kilometers inland. And what happens is insects, there's studies where insects up to several hundred kilometers away from the ocean are acclimated to more salt in their diet. And so radiation is liberated from the ocean sea spray the same way as salt. So, and then a lot of that, of course, washes back down to the coastline now and bioaccumulates in that 200-mile zone. Fukushima melted fuel is drifting in the ocean on the land, lacking containment. It ends up on the coastline and blows into the communities, and people get an exceptional dose. And that the health harm will go on for thousands, if not tens of thousands of years. So it's not just humans, it's going to be the insects, the birds, the mammals, the animals, and the bacteria in your forest. This is why you're seeing these wicked forest fires over the last number of years accelerating, because there's no bacteria in most of the forest. New York Times, ocean life faces a mass extinction. We may be on the precipice of a major extinction event in marine wildlife. 2015. This is due to Fukushima. Forecast map of radioactive clouds shows a threat to the U.S. West Coast. March the 16th, 5 days after. And this is 8 days later. Cesium-137, which is actually, they say cesium to trick you, manipulate you, and deceive you. It's actually uranium, plutonium, and curium mostly. Is the curium fission isotopes are the biggest byproduct of the radiated fuel rods. And curium isotopes, you need lead shielding 20 times thicker than you do for plutonium. Forecast for North America and Europe up to March the 24th. This one here is the Chernobyl model. Up there is the Fukushima model. They're doing a comparison, which is unusual, really. So that top one is the Fukushima from France's model. TEPCO paid for the creation of a blacklist of actors and musicians who are against TEPCO. Okay. So the water filtration system, TEPCO to abandon a Riva system. Now, the date on that is August the 12th, 2014. 2014. The accident happened March 11th, 2011. Okay. So TEPCO has determined that it will cease the use of the Riva, which is France's decontamination system, because it's not lived up to expectations. In fact, they've never used it, as you'll see. They talk about that. It was set up in June 2011, 3 months after the nuclear meltdowns, which is, this thing at the beginning is the most lethal, right? So the design was so complicated, blah, 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 blah. It processed 76,000 tons of contaminated water in the first 3 months, but was repeatedly forced to shut down by a variety of problems. It didn't actually process it. It tried, and you'll see why. For the last 3 years, the system has been unused and kept out of operation. So what they're saying to you, all the way up until August 12, 2014, there was no filtration system. So where did all the water go? The reactors actually need 4,800 tons of water per minute, 1,440 minutes each day. It needs 4,800 tons. Each reactor, worldwide, that's what they use. Let me bring up the calculator. So 4,800 tons times 1,440 minutes in a 24-hour period is 7 million tons a day. Multiply that by 365 days is 2,522,000,000 a year per reactor times 4 melted reactors is 10 billion tons a year. Multiply that by 10 years. By 10 years. And you got 100 million tons. Did I do the math wrong on that or something? Just bear with me. I'm going to try that first equation again. So 4,000, I just want to double check my own math here. 800 times 1,440 minutes. Yeah, that's right. That's right. So it needs 100 million tons. So each day you need, for each minute, 4,800 tons. They're collecting around 100 tons a day, they say, and they're putting that in tanks. But that story falls apart, as you'll see coming up. I'll show you the evidence. The radiation levels measured in the system poses a risk to the workers during operation and maintenance. That's why it hadn't been used for 3 years. It was lethal doses. So if you take a filter and you're filtering 2 sieverts per liter, you can't get inside the building immediately. You can't get near the filter again. See? The tanks are built to trick you into thinking that the ocean is not polluted. Japan is doing this because they don't want to get blamed for killing the Pacific Ocean. The nuclear industry doesn't want you to understand. That is why I had 5 thumbs down before the video even started. TEPCO is still facing an uphill battle when it comes to dealing with water storage at the Fukushima plant. Now this is August the 12th, 2014. Underneath the plant, an enormous amount of groundwater continues to flow directly into the ocean. And the utility had a limited amount of water it can store in storage tanks on site. 3 months ago, TEPCO attempted to divert some of the flow of groundwater with an underground bypass, but failed to achieve any meaningful results. In other words, they abandoned the system. So it hasn't stored any water, and it's a lethal dosage. They can't get near it. So for 2014, August 2014, there was no filtration, and therefore, as you'll see coming up, the numbers are about 2 sieverts per liter. So if you fill up a tank, that's the filtration system. That's before it was operational. As the story shows you, they couldn't go near it once they turned it on. So if you fill up the tanks with 2 sieverts per liter, because that's what it's probably much more than that. They're only talking about beta. And not talking about neutrons, right? Uranium, plutonium, curium, americium, neptunium, stuff like that. Lethal doses. So if you fill up a tank at 2 sieverts per liter, you're talking millions of sieverts, because it's actually much more than that per liter. You can't build another tank. And you can't stand up there. That's a lethal dose. So when you see all these tanks, that's proof that the tanks are empty. Because if any of the tanks were full, you couldn't actually build another tank there, because the steel is not thick enough to shield you. And if there's, you can't, the hoses that would pump water to the tanks would be so lethal you couldn't go near the hoses. Anywhere on site, wherever there's a hose, you would have to stay several hundred feet away from it. So do you get how this actually works? Because I got lots of evidence. And Pinhead, Japanese government criticizes TEPCO's poor management. Now they use the words leak. Have you actually seen the buildings? Bear with me. You tell me if the buildings are leaking or hemorrhaging. So does that building look like it's leaking, or do you think it's hemorrhaging? Do you know the difference? That was a 190-foot building. So do you think that's going to leak, or do you think it's going to hemorrhage? Because it's a China syndrome nuclear meltdown. Japanese government criticizes TEPCO's poor management. That was Yoshida Suga, Prime Minister Suga, that is unacceptable to have contaminated water, and they all use the words leaking. And that's not a word that's appropriate for what's happening. From the plant's storage tanks and flowing into the ocean. So avoiding talking about pouring water over the reactor cores and that's getting washed out underneath it into the ocean, they're claiming the only water going into the ocean is the stuff that's leaking out of the storage tanks. Incredible deception. Unbelievable deception. Remember, the country, 6 prefectures, which is like provinces and in North America, the whole country is covered in radiation. So every time it rains, the whole country is also hemorrhaging radiation into the ocean, because that's where everything washes down to. So they built the tanks to manipulate you and deceive you. TEPCO releases a video of groundwater entering the crippled Fukushima Daiichi complex. Radiation levels around the tanks used to store thousands of tons of radioactive water at Fukushima Daiichi are at 2.2 sieverts per hour. These are lethal doses we're talking about per gallon, but it's actually more than that because they're talking about beta. Because these are complicated stories, yeah? Wait for it. Just looking for that. Tanks. So 2 sieverts an hour of beta radiation emitted from a single liter of leaked water. You can't call 2 sieverts per liter water. That's fuel. That's nuclear fuel. And you can see the source is always... It's not just beta, it's going to be alpha and gamma and neutrons. ALP system, June the 23rd. Now, I showed you the headlines in 2014, August 12th. They were using a Riva Francis system. ALPS didn't exist at that point, see? So this is a fake headline. ALPS system brought back online at Fukushima Daiichi. Because that's... TEPCO, right? Claiming. And you can see they're always stood around doing nothing. So this system was built to trick you into thinking that they're going to filter the water. It's the first time all 3 lines of the system have been in operation since March. The highly radioactive water not only damages the equipment, causing corrosion and leaks, the highly radioactive water, but also prevents workers from spending long periods of time working near the system. It's actually, you can't get near the system. So 2 sieverts per liter, you filter that for a few minutes, and now you stop putting nuclear water through it and just put fresh water through it. The fresh water comes out the other side. It's coming out at 5 and 10 sieverts per liter. Because that's how it works, right? The filter now is like thousands of sieverts after 10 or 15 minutes. The numbers are just terrifying. So a Riva water filtration system, in August, there was no system all the way up to August, right? You read that in an earlier story. But TEPCO is trying to convince you that the Riva system or ALP system is working, but it prevents workers from spending long periods. It prevents them from going, period, in the building. So they couldn't use it. It couldn't be used. You can't filter it, see? In July, 2 of the 3 lines were taken offline to fix areas and connecting pipes which are having problems with corrosion. First off, this is 2 sieverts per liter you're talking about. You ain't fixing no pipes. You are not going near those pipes for 1,000 years. The ALP system is still being operated, trial status, and TEPCO has not determined what the trial status will end. First off, it's simply, you can't filter it. And the tanks are only built to trick you and deceive you. As I showed you earlier, I showed you the documentation. TEPCO officials cannot estimate how frequent water will be discharged from Fukushima Daiichi. For the next month, the radiation levels of the stored water will be tested. If the groundwater contains less than 1 becquerel per liter of cesium, 134, 137, and 5 becquerels per liter of beta-emitting material, and 1,500 becquerels of tritium, then it will be released. So if it's 1 becquerel per liter of cesium, like the numbers of cesium throughout the whole country are staggering. In Tokyo, it's 19 million becquerels per square meter. But the water is only 1 becquerel per liter. Oh yeah, sure, right at ground zero. Now, what you see there, those rectangles, they're actually bags where they claimed they were putting 2 sieverts per liter in bags, and these bags would have zero protection. So you need a foot of steel to stop the radiation from radiating you 50 feet away. But when you get up to these numbers, if that was actually really water they were pouring over the fuel, all of this is to trick you into thinking they didn't kill the Pacific or destroy the Pacific or pollute the Pacific. TEPCO's still struggling to keep the head above contaminated water at Fukushima Daiichi. And to show you this caricature. This weekend, TEPCO announced that a water sample taken from a cable trench under the Unit 2 turbine building contained levels of radiation comparable to those seen in the first week of the nuclear disaster, and that the laboratory test showed 8.7 million becquerels of tritium, 2.3 billion becquerels of cesium, and 750 million becquerels of other radioactive material in each liter of contaminated water. Well, like, cesium doesn't float around in the tank by itself and then you accidentally scoop it up. If you take a sample, that's the whole tank. Now what that means though, per liter or per tank, is you can't build another tank alongside of this tank if that's true. And they're talking a trench. You can't get near the trench, you can't get within a football field of the tank if this came out of a tank, for instance. More than 5,000 tons of contaminated water are captured in and leaking out of this one cable trench. So 5,000 tons, divide that by liters and multiply by 2.5 billion becquerels of cesium per liter. And then the numbers are just like bloop. Let's do it. I'll do it for you. Hang on. It's fun. It's trendy. It's trendy. So 2.35 billion, 5,000 tons. Let's get that number first. So 5,000 tons. 5,000 tons. So each ton is 1,000 liters. Oh, I mixed that up. Multiply by 1,000 liters. Gives you... Did I really screw that up that easy? Let's try this again. So 5,000 tons. Multiply it by... Each ton is 1,000 liters. So that's 5 million liters. Multiplied by, what's the number? 2.35 billion. Of just cesium, the only number we're going to do. So 2.5 billion. Yeah, 2.35 billion. So times 235,000,000,000 equals that number. These are absurd numbers. Oh, and 750 million becquerels of other radioactive materials. So they use cesium to... Whenever you see cesium, whenever I see cesium, I want to smack them in the mouth because they're lying to you. That's how they lie to you. But the numbers we're talking about are holy, oh my goodness stuff. These are absurd numbers. And remember the story I showed you earlier. If it's more than 1 becquerel per liter of cesium, they're not going to dump it in the ocean. In other words, they've been dumping it in the ocean because it's lethal doses by the liter. You can't store it. You can't keep it there. The homeless were dropping dead like... whenever I talk about, because it's not nuclear scientists there, not nuclear corporations or nuclear universities or nuclear students or nuclear academics or nuclear alumni or nuclear or PhDs or anybody else. It's just the homeless, the destitute, the victims of society, immigrants who don't speak the language. They don't know what to do with this stuff. They don't even know what it is. They don't understand, you know what I'm saying, the nuances. So more than 5,000 tons of contaminated water are captured in and leaking out of this one cable trench and leaking into the ocean. You can't say, when you're talking about 5,000 tons, this is not leaking. They always use the word leak and leaking. And it's disgusting. It's despicable. It's part of the cover-up. But it's revolting. So 5 million liters, and each liter is a lethal dose. So 5 million, just that trench is putting out 10 million sieverts of cesium, right? That's basically how you're going to look at this. So 5 sieverts, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, is a lethal dose to a human. So what is 5 or 10 million sieverts at 2 sieverts per liter? And the laboratory tests have shown 8.7 million becquerels of... There's no way to find 8.7 million becquerels of tritium in that liter when you got 2.35 billion becquerels of cesium and 750 million becquerels of other radioactive material. It's impossible to come out with a number of tritium. So again, what you see is this despicable, revolting, hateful industry. TEPCO finds defects in the Alps water treatment system. Defects. The filter this is April the 10th, 2014. Now remember, I showed you August the 12th, 2014. The Rivas system was the filtration system, and it had not worked for its entire life cycle there, all the way up until August 2014. According to people that shouldn't be there in the first place, Tokyo Electric, they're not decommissioned specialists. Why not use the people who made the reactors in the first place? The operators are the crippled. Look at the buildings. See the building to the right? That's reactor 4. Does that look crippled to you? Does it look destroyed? And by the way, the building to the right is the official picture. And that's what it would look like 190 feet up. That's what it would look like. And both of those are the official pictures. Right? So they're trying to convince you it looks like that, not like this. And tomorrow night we're going to tell the story of Reactor 4, which is what that used to be, and Reactor 3. It's going to be epic. Utility found 6 centimeters of resin material separating radioactive and processed water broken off. Utility, first off, at 2 sieverts a liter, you are not going near that. You need to use a satellite camera and zoom in. That's the only way you're going to tell Jack. You are not going near it. Once you flip that on, you run away. And there is a precedence for that narrative at Hanford. Elementary school in Japan, this is how cruel the Japanese actually are. The elementary school, try wrapping your mind around this story. Elementary school in Japan is using water bottles. They're filling bottles up with water to shield the students from radiation rather than evacuate them. An elementary school on top of that, 34 miles west of the nuclear meltdowns, is using, I'll show you the pictures coming up here. It's using water bottles to shield radiation coming from the school courtyard, and other areas around the school buildings. The bottles are filled with water, placed inside large square boxes which are stacked around the classrooms. Do you send your child to a classroom like this? So the idea of the water is it shields the students rather than evacuate them, it shields the student. We got a question in the comments section. Do we know, let me bring it up for you. Do we know what happened to the old channel? I would like to redirect my followers and explain what happened. I was out on the expedition doing a species count 450 kilometers away from home on the quad in my campsite, and I hooked up my cell phone booster and got online, and my website, my YouTube channel was gone. I checked my email and there was no message for why they took the site down. And so I found ways to send YouTube inquiries, and I never got no explanation. They just took it down. They took it down basically because of the documentation, right? And so I started up this new site, which obviously you found. I had to come home from the expedition, give it up, and come home, start up another YouTube channel, and start doing the shows to try to get this documentation back out into the consciousness of the planet, because nobody else, I get it, right? It's very difficult to compete or to tell this story, and it's even more difficult to compete against people like me, because I have so much information documented. I'm able to, and I've built this whole operation just to tell this story. And so a lot of people feel overwhelmed. Well, geez, I can't compete with Dana. But that's not the way you should feel, folks. Like, if you remember, I started extremely humble. I started out with a little tiny computer with like a 7-inch screen. And I used to stutter. It was horrible audio. But every day I would do a live stream and cover about 100 headlines about Fukushima. And eventually we'd done all kinds of research. But anyway, that's the story, unfortunately, Mello. You're welcome. Okay, so the students in the school, instead of evacuating them, they were forced to get water bottles. That shows you how incredibly cruel Japan is. They won't evacuate the elementary school students. It's using water bottles to shield radiation coming from the courtyard and other areas. The bottles are filled with water, placed inside square boxes and stacked around the classrooms. That's the definition of hell and cruel. That's the definition of cruel, to make these children go to that school. That's the most bizarre story imaginable. According to the school, they seem to have reduced the radiation levels inside the schools by 1/3. That's Koriyama City. Residents of Koriyama City have been concerned about the high amount of radioactive materials found around their towns. And so if you go over the United Nations Scientific Committee on the Effects of Atomic Radiation and look up absorbed doses of red bone marrow in Japan in the first year, and look up in that second line right there, and I'll put it on the big screen for everybody, the big shut screen. So the second line, average disposition, they're only talking about cesium. There's 1,000 fission products. 162,000 becquerels, atomic decays per second, per square meter. These are absurd numbers, by the way. Elementary school in Japan is using water bottles to shield students from radiation. They probably deserve it, the little brats, right? Residents of Koriyama City have been concerned about the high amount of material found around their town and refused to put the students somewhere else. While school lunches are tested for radiation, parents are concerned because they are largely unable to find out where the items are originally produced. Like if you're in that position where you got to wonder where this stuff is being produced, that's pretty rough. Thank you, Mello. Hi, everybody. Because Koriyama City is outside the evacuation zone, the government has barely conducted any decontamination. But as I showed you, Koriyama City is brutally radioactive, and there's 340,000 people there, with 162,000 of just cesium. And you can't just measure radiation in cesium. What did I miss here? Tokyo Electric determines human error as a cause of contamination leak at Fukushima Daiichi. Really? Are you sure it wasn't the detonation of those buildings? Does the building to the left look like it's leaking? Or does it look like it's destroyed? So the reactor core went all the way up to the top of the building, and at the top of the building was this fuel pool and that fuel pool with 4 decades of reactor cores. And the reason they're doing that is because there's no repository anywhere on the planet, let alone Japan, and they got nowhere to put it. So it's kept at the very top of the buildings that don't exist anymore. That was reactor 3. That was the mixed oxide fuel building. According to the utilities, over 100 tons of water containing 240 million becquerels per liter of beta ray emitting substances leaked out of the storage tank over a period of 9 hours before the leak was discovered. Look, if you discovered it, you died. You're the guy who died right there. You're talking per liter. They're not mentioning gamma or alpha or neutrons. They're just talking beta. Radiation doesn't just come in beta. You know what I mean? I hope you do anyway. These are absurd numbers, by the way. 240 million becquerels per liter. That's 2.2 sieverts per liter. These are lethal doses. A gallon is a lethal dose just walking past it. So if you walk past 100 tons containing 2.2 sieverts, let me do the math on it for you. Why not? So what does that add up to, Dana? Okay. Let me bring it over. 100 tons. This is quick. We'll do this really quick. 100 tons times 2.2 sieverts. I'm sorry. Times 1,000 liters. The hell did I just do? 100,000, did I? And I'll get it right. Okay, so 100 times 1,000 is 100,000. Yeah. So that's 100,000 liters. There's 1,000 liters in a ton. So multiply it. What was the number? 240 million. Or 2.2 sieverts per liter is 220,000 liters, or sieverts. So 220,000 sieverts, that's a lethal dose from football fields away. So you didn't discover it. You can't see it from a football field away. In fact, that would be emitting neutron gamma shine you would probably see from Tokyo per liter. The water which leaked was largely partially treated water from early on in the disaster in March there was no, as we showed you already, there was no treated water, right? For sure. We showed you that documentation. And what was the date on this story? 2014. And as we showed you earlier, that there was no filtration system all the way up until August 12th, 2014. So if you did filter that, then the filter is 220,000 sieverts. You can't get inside the building again, see? All right. Don't worry, I'm only going to tell you 500 more times. 240 million becquerels per liter is 2.2 sieverts per liter. Or, well, it's actually around 5 sieverts per liter. Well, let's just go with the small number. You can't, if you filter that, you can't get within a football field of the building for 1,000 years. TEPCO also admitted that workers were not sufficiently monitoring the levels of water inside the tanks. No, because the tanks are empty. If you fill up the tank, you can't build another tank alongside of it. Because, like, you've seen 220 million sieverts for 100 tons. If you put 1,000 tons in the tank, you can't even look at Fukushima site without dying. So you can't fill the tanks with these numbers. Therefore, the tanks have to be empty. And which makes sense, see? Because you had so many earthquakes there. By the way, the tanks are bolted together. That's only meant to last for a couple of years. And they're not thick enough to shield you from tritium, let alone beta. TEPCO submits criteria to Nuclear Regulation Authority to dump contaminated rainwater in the ocean. 2013. Well, they had no filtration system. The whole country is dumping rainwater into radioactive rain. So once the rainwater has been diluted to 10 becquerels of beta ray emitting radionuclides, we'll discharge it into the sea. So 240 million becquerels of beta per liter. How do you get that down to 10 becquerels of beta ray? Once again, diluting it is spreading it. You can't, diluting it is not like milk where you dilute it and it becomes inert. Radiation, all you're going to do is spread it. You can't dilute it. Diluting it is spreading it. You can't get rid of it. You can drop it in battery acid, not going to hurt it. Put radiation isotopes in an incinerator at 3,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. All you got to do is liberate it back into the environment. You can't destroy it. Diluting it does not destroy it. And in fact, as you've seen, there was no filtration system. A leak of contaminated water at Fukushima Reactor Unit 3. And let me show you a picture of Reactor 3. She's the pretty one, that one, Reactor 3, boy. This is not a leak. You can't cut. Like, using the word leak is Looney Tunes. Does that look like it's leaking, or does it look like it's destroyed? And if you got to think about it, you're in trouble. Discovered a stream of water near a foot wide flowing to the first floor of the reactor building before escaping into a drain on the floor. Well, then they didn't discover it because they died. There was no one to tell the story. After an investigation, found the water contained levels of radioactive material equal to highly contaminated water, which is accumulating in the basement of the buildings. There is no basement. The basements are cracked. The investigation revealed some 24 million becquerels per liter of beta ray, including strontium 700,000 becquerels per liter, cesium 1.7 million becquerels per liter of cesium-137. These are absurd numbers again. Regulator urges TEPCO to dump tritiated water into the Pacific Ocean. Once again, we know they're not. That's 2013, December. August 2014, they admitted they had no filtration system. So to call it tritiated water is crimes against humanity. That's actual crimes against humanity. And crimes against, it's an omnicide. It's destroying all the species. Hi, everybody. They're seemingly just as unable to prevent the eventual release of, and now to call it tritium water in 2013, when the filtration system never worked even in 2000 or August of 2014, are unable to prevent the daily outflow of extremely radioactive material. But what it does show, it shows it is consistent perpetual lies, right? Calling it tritiated water, when I already showed you, this is obviously nuts to call it tritiated water, right? This, you can't call that tritiated water, say per liters. That's not the big numbers that I was showing you earlier, the nutty numbers I was showing you earlier. TEPCO begins critical work on loading Fukushima Daiichi Unit 4 spent fuel pool, November 18, 2013. Now, first off, as I showed you in August the 12th, 2014, they still haven't figured out how to filter water, and the system was so radioactive they couldn't go near it. Okay, so when they're claiming that's reactor 4, okay, and here's the official pictures. This is 2013 they're claiming. So, do you think the building to the right looks like that inside? And by the way, the fuel pool, what you're looking at, is the very top of the building. You're looking at the roof of the building there. That's the roof of the building. Woof. The woof of the building. I like that better than roof. So that's the roof. That's the roof. Baby. Then, there is no roof, because the roof would be way, way up there somewhere. Because the buildings were originally 190 foot high. Okay. So anyway, the story that I'll show you the rest of the documentation right now, but doomsday-like radiation released to fire and pull at Unit 4, it would be a global catastrophe. So we've seen 20 million particles of radioactive iodine per liter on the United States, but that would have been full of fission products. It doesn't just come in iodine 131. And so originally this story, see, iodine got an 8-day half-life, which means what? It's another 8 days is all gone? No. There's 10 half-lives. Like nuclear is just one big Ponzi scheme, right? 10 half-lives. But a half-life is half. 10 is half. Yeah, but not nuclear. There's 10. They're lunatics, right? So instead of calling it 1/10, they call it a half. What picture is reactor 6? No, that's not even the site. They're not even at the site. And reactor 6 doesn't look like that. Reactor 6 was... see, when you changed... they said they were doing maintenance, so there was no fuel in the reactor. There's always fuel in the reactor. They never take more than 1/3 of the reactor at a time. That's not reactor 6. That's probably in America. They're not going to Fukushima Prefecture. That's where the homeless go. There's no nuclear scientists there, no nuclear academics. You really think that they're going to go there? Right? You know what I'm saying? It's not reactor 6. I used to think it was reactor 6, but then reality struck me that only the homeless go to Fukushima. Journalists are not going there. They'll green screen themselves there, but that's about it. West Coast hit with 220 million atoms. So does it sound like when you're talking about these numbers, right there, when you see that number, you got to multiply that by curium and uranium fission products and plutonium fission products and 1,000 other fission products in that same liter. 1,500 atoms of the radioactive sulfur per cubic meter was detected in the California air. These are staggering numbers, right? So Arnie Gunnarsson and Maggie Gunners. Maggie was a spokesperson for the nuclear industry for a couple of decades. They're trying to convince you the building looks like that over there. This is actually what it looks like. Is that a crime? Apparently it's not. Apparently that's acceptable to come out and lie to everybody. Okay, so is the ocean contaminated or not? That's what everybody wants to know, right? Okay, well, bear with me. La-di-da-di-da. Now, tomorrow night we're going to cover Reactor 3 and Reactor 4. And by the way, the site is covered in radioactive steam at 10 sieverts an hour. But that's what the Geiger counters are maxed out at, 10 sieverts per hour. And so if you're in that plume anywhere on this massive site, anywhere in that plume, that's a lethal dose. And everything the plume touches becomes extremely radioactive for 1,000 years. Sympathy money for disposal of tsunami debris. Blah, 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 blah. Okay. So, is it all in the tanks or is it hurting the ocean? All right. So, record numbers, high numbers of deaths in Hawaii, carcasses scattered throughout the islands, possible health effects from Fukushima radiation. Sick and starving animals are a mystery to the experts. On the West Coast, very sick, very emaciated animals. Mind-blowing die-off of seabirds from California to Alaska, unprecedented. Every bird we're seeing is starving to death. Now, I was out looking for birds today, and this is how my day started off. So I'm going to play, there's just two very short videos I'm going to play before it does the rest of it. So the trailer lights won't work. They worked yesterday, but they won't work. And I was at it for an hour. It got me tortured. And so I went out and bought new electrical wires. I was going to bring them back if I didn't have to use them, but unfortunately. So Wednesday, August the 11th. The lights are not working. So I'm going to rewire it. Replace this one, just this piece here first, just so I can get the boat in the water. If that works, then it works, and if it doesn't work, then I'm just going to replace the whole wiring, tear everything off, even though everything is supposed to be, it was working good yesterday. It's just got me tortured. I'm at this for over an hour. I can't find the issue, so I'll just stick all new wires on and hopefully that'll solve it. And so that's what I done. It took 2.5 hours before I finally got the lights working. So that's a warning light. I'm going to go back in, take it out of the water, go home, pull the spark plugs, check the filters, blah, 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 blah. Check the engine leg. I don't know. That one's just a, you see it coming on there? That's, there's no, so one's temperature, one's oil, one's rev. That one, I don't know, that's a general warning. And so, who knows. Anyway, disappointed. That's a lot of work to get out on the ocean and have that happen to me. But you can't take a chance, right? It's the ocean. And so, go and pull her out of the water, I suppose. Well, she was cutting out, now she's not cutting out, but that don't mean nothing. Yeah, I got no idea. That sucks. So tomorrow I'm going to pull the, like you say, the spark plugs, drain the Raycor water separator. I guess I'll go buy oil filter and leg oil. And today I had to spend $30 on launch permit and burn all that fuel. We had to go down and buy $30 worth of wire to rewire the trailer. Like, I don't have to rewire the trailer. I can just use arm singles, hand singles. But you're taking a chance with other people's lives, right? And it only took 2.5 hours to get it to work. I literally wanted to pull the rest of the hair out of my head. It was sweltering hot. It was muggy hot. There was no sunshine. It was just really heavy moisture hot. I sweated for like 10 hours straight today. It was horrible. I got home 6 p.m. and we'd start the show at 9 p.m., right? 3 hours later, we had to start the show. I'm burnt out. I'm literally burnt out. Go out in the ocean. There is a lot of squid down here. I was talking to fishermen today, and they did see a number of birds, but didn't get close to where I wanted to go because the motor kept beeping and giving me a warning I had to turn around and come back. Unbelievably disappointed. And so tomorrow I'm going to change the leg oil is about $60. The filter's $12, $14, the oil filter. I got another Raycor water separator that I can stick in. And I'll drain the carburetor, I'll drain the system because it's fuel injected, right? In the old days, you just drain. There's a little nut at the bottom of the carburetors. You used to just drain the carburetors, keep pumping till all the water came out of the bottom of the carburetor. Long story short was we're trying to do a species count because of Fukushima radioactive fallout. Bizarre die-off on the west coast is not just the Pacific. We're seeing the die-off. See, babies being found. Record numbers of deaths declared, unusual mortality. An animal emergency. Babies being found emaciated. Just the tip of the iceberg. Severely emaciated. Countless dead birds reported in the Pacific off the U.S. coast. Nothing will eat the bodies. No seals presence. The fish are not there. All of them are starving. Animals are acting weird. Sick and weak. Too weak to fly. Too weak to run. We want to know if it's Fukushima. All of them are starving. Unprecedented die-off of nearly endangered marine mammals. More have washed up in the last few months than all of recorded history combined. Experts scrambling to deal with the latest wildlife crisis in the Pacific. Entire generations of baby sea lions dying. It's incredible. It's so unusual. There's no explanation. Expect the same thing happen again next year. Carts filled with emaciated dead bodies. So does it sound like Fukushima's already affected the ocean? Or mysterious whale deaths in California, scientists perplexed. Continuing trends of whales washing ashore. Animals are sick, starving, emaciated, too weak to swim, hemorrhaging. And for a whale to be emaciated, it didn't eat for 7,000 or 8,000 miles for its whole migratory route to go from 12 inches of blubber down to 3 inches, which is considered emaciated. Sardines, crayfish disappeared from the Pacific Ocean. They just vanished. Mammals are starving, struggling to survive on the West Coast. Much larger than anything on records. Animals basically dying on our beaches like walking skeletons. So hungry they gone on rocks. Skin is hanging off. So normally, like baby seals, if they get separated, they go ashore, and then the rocks are normally covered in mollusks and algae, up to 700 algae, kelps. There's 6,500 invertebrates without the backbone living amongst that. Or starfish and sea urchins and sea cucumbers. There's all kinds of things they can eat. But now since Fukushima, all of that has disappeared and the rocks are naked. And so they still, because they would normally eat the rocks with all kinds of food on it, and then they get healthy but be able to excrete the rocks, right? Now they can't. Like walking skeletons. Extremely emaciated. Mysterious surge in sick marine mammals. Deaths up 1,500% of the facility. Killer whales dying along the Pacific coast, very sick, emaciated. No babies born in the past 2 years. Social structure splintering. Marine birds disappearing in the Pacific Northwest. Significant ecological shift, crashes in many species. Something's happening on a big level. Herring problem may be far worse than revealed. Results from contamination. Seals and sea lions starving to death. It's just spiked. Calls started coming non-stop. Cute hemorrhaging found in owls, also caribou, grizzly bears emaciated, polar bears emaciated, apex predators all showing up emaciated. Very poor condition, badly emaciated. Sea stars ripping themselves to pieces. They actually disappeared. There was 78 species. We've done multiple expeditions. If you go over to the nuclear proctologist, you'll see before and after pictures on the front page you get to. It's staggering. Extinction threat for salmon, loss of sardines, squid, sea urchins, kelp, massive sea star, marine mammal strandings. So this is an event. West Coast bird die-off is biggest ever recorded. Stomachs completely empty, staggering, alarming, unheard of. Never seen anything like it. Unprecedented in size, scope, duration. Hundreds of thousands. It was actually turned out to be 1.5 million common murres, and they dive 600 feet all day and chase anchovies and squids and sardines and herring and krill, which is like a big shrimp that can live up to 10 years. They were the migratory. Everything I just mentioned is the migratory. So the animals will follow this migratory squid and sardines and anchovies and krill and herring and mackerel and everything. They'll follow that for thousands and thousands of miles, right? It disappeared, so all the animals shows up starving, emaciated. 7,800 dead murres on a 1 mile stretch of beach. Pre-Fukushima, the odds of finding 2 dead birds on a 1 mile stretch of beach, you had better chances of getting hit by a Soviet satellite in the next 3 seconds. 3, 2, 1. Oh my God, where'd you go? I can't see you. And so it's not just the common murres, thick-billed murres, black-legged kittiwakes, horned and tufted pigeons, gulls, sooty and short-tailed shearwaters. Some of these avian mortalities were concurrent with whales, sea lions, seals, sea otters, and fish mortalities. Ongoing fish famine. A dearth of food across the ocean. I went out and done expeditions to Alaska year after year, and what we discovered was an extinction event. Worst wildlife die-off ever recorded anywhere on Earth underway on the West Coast. And we're not just talking marine die-offs. Many more species are getting sick, facing possibilities of extinction. It's Fukushima, see? Sea creatures sick and dying, disappearing at alarming rates. New York Times, ocean life faces a mass extinction. We may be on the precipice of a major extinction event in marine life. So we started the show off tonight with 5 thumbs down a half an hour before the show even started. They don't want you thinking about what Fukushima has already done to the ocean and the planet. They want you to think about tritium in a couple of years' time. That's the lie, see? And I showed you all the evidence. You can debunk me. Go get your evidence, make a video, and debunk everything I showed you. But I'm not a lawyer. I'm not here to play games. And I was out on the ocean today, and now I got to spend tomorrow We got to burn about $140 on filters and spark plugs and leg oil. That engine I got is an old engine. That's been to Alaska 6 times, for God's sakes. It's an old engine, right? And we washed up on the rocks in a hurricane with it, blah, 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 blah. It's been to hell and back already. It should have been placed years ago. But I'm going to have to burn about 140 on it. We raised another 30 last night from James Lucid. And I'll show you how this works, though. Okay, so bring up the external page here. So you can see I had 25 minutes before this show started. I had 5 thumbs down, right? Okay, I'll show you interior. So now I have 15 thumbs up and 0 thumbs down because the filter got it. But what they had done by hitting it 5 thumbs down before the show started is they had triggered a censorship at Google. And so this video probably get no more views than I got right now. I got 43 playbacks. And so yesterday's video was a great video. That got censored heavily. Yeah, they took the thumbs down off. That's the filter. But it doesn't matter because they also trigger, by doing that, they trigger, that's what they're hoping to do, is trigger Google. Now we'll send this to another, this video goes to another server. It won't show up in the indexes for 14 or 15 hours. And you can check the video tomorrow morning, say 10 hours time. I'll only have maybe 10 more views than the end of the show. Yeah. And Obsolete gave me a thumbs up before the show. So tomorrow I'm going to have to burn what money I got left. We got to try to get, we just filled up the boat and filled up the truck with $300 worth of fuel. And I got to use, we got to get the boat, the weather's, this is the first break of perfect weather coming up. So for a whole, I got enough fuel now to go for a whole week, hopefully. Because I done it this way on purpose. I won't be going fast or something. We're going to, because you can't see anything when you're going fast. We're going to go out looking for birds and whales and looking for feeders and everything else and see how many species shows up to feed on squid or herrings or anchovies or sardines or something. We're going to try to identify all of it. Or I can head back across the interior and finish the species counts of insects, which turns out to be extinct, right? We got to tell the rest of that story. It took down all of my videos and took down my site. So I'm still disoriented. I'm trying to get it back into motion, right? And so work like a dog all day today and burnt an extra $60 I didn't want to spend on a permit to get to launch the boat and for wiring that I didn't want to spend. But I'm glad I did because it's done. But now the motor is beeping every few seconds and warning me, right? We could lose the motor if I'm not careful. And so I'll do an inspection of the motor tomorrow morning. If I don't find any damage or any sabotage or anything missing, then we want to change the spark plug, change the oil filter and the oil, change the leg oil, and drain. I already have a Raycor water separator filter on the boat, an extra one. They're actually expensive, but I'll use the new one, right? And just try to eliminate all the basic problems because it's not overheating. There is water coming out of the rear of the engine. It wasn't, by the way, when I started. That's not unusual. Sometimes you got to give it a shot of gas to get, because salt builds up in there and stops it. But after a few minutes, water should start coming out, right? And it did. So that's working. So if anybody wants to donate, there's links below the video. There's only 2 ways to donate. Both of those links are below the video. They are both directly to me, right? You don't have to look for me. Both of those links are. So the one that goes over to my website, if you scroll down a little tiny bit, you're going to see a donate button for credit cards, and the other one's a PayPal. And those links are below the video. And look, they just took down my site with 24,000 subscribers and 1,600 videos. But I'm not going away. I'm not giving up, and I'm not slowing down. I'm going to try. And I got 90 subscribers, and I'm working like a dog nonstop. And I'm just going to keep pressing forward. I don't take steps backwards. We always step forward. So I'm going forward as if this operation, nothing happened, which is, I'm not really, you know what I mean? I'm trying to keep this operation afloat, is what I'm saying. And so I'll do I'll check everything tomorrow morning. If it looks appropriate, then I'll change the oil, I'll change the leg oil, I'll change the spark plug, I'll drain filters if necessary, I'll replace them, etc. And I think I should anyway, by rights, right? In order to do the oil, you got to get, they're big engines, right? So you got to get 4 liters, I think they take, or 5 liters, and then the oil filter. Then the leg oil is about $60 on its own. It's a nightmare. It's a disaster. But we got no choice. That's part of it. You got to keep maintenance on the equipment. Who knows? Yeah, no, the censorship is biblical. No, you can't even get into Canada right now, sure, obsolete. Look, I can't fund myself. How can I fund anybody else, right? You know what I mean? I can't even fund this operation, and they took down my site and destroyed me, but we still got to do the job, we still got to do the work, we still got to do the research, we still got to try. And so I'm just doing the best I can, and it's not easy. Okay, well, that's the show. My apologizes. So there is no water in those tanks. The tanks are meant to deceive you. Good night, everybody. Obsolete, Timo, James Lucid. I only serve one king. Let me go up through the names here. We got Ella and Ted Richards. I'm burnt out. What a horrible day this was. Steve Edwards, Chandra Churchill, and everybody that watches this later. Hugs for everybody. Mellow Yellow, Dana Nisana, anybody I missed, my apologies. I'm trying to get everybody. There's not that many commenting, so. Let me see. I guess that's it, is it? Anybody else? Comments in the next minute or something, I might get you. Everybody that watches later, hugs for everybody. God bless everybody. Yeah. I got a shit day tomorrow. We got to do all that maintenance. Got to get the boat back in the water, make sure it's actually working, or we're in real trouble. It makes me sick to my guts here tonight. $30 is for 1 year. It's for not a year, but for the season. And because that spot is close to me, right? But if the boat doesn't work, it's a $30 loss, right? Is what I was saying. Now, I can't afford to pay $30 a lunch. I'm at a business. No, we don't know, but I can guarantee you, Mellow Yellow, all the Tokyo athletes will get sick for sure. I appreciate it, everybody. Good night, everybody. Hugs for everybody. God bless. Have a great night. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. I'll be working on the boat tomorrow. Hopefully, I'll find an issue and solve it. And we can get back out on the ocean, do some real work out there, research, and still keep this show going, right? And hopefully we get more people subscribing to my new site here. And we can rebuild and keep this whole operation moving forward. And like you said, they gave me 5 thumbs down before the show even started. That was a dirty, dirty, dirty trick, eh? That was a horrific thing to do. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up if you get a chance. Good night, everybody. God bless.